said to Jeremy that I always have to go and do a little bit of research, of course, but he made me work very hard because he's done so much. He's like a sort of polymath, and he's done films, of course, and of course he's done television, and he's done theatre. And I think you're one of the few people who have been triple crown winner of having won an Oscar, an Emmy, and a Tony award. I noticed that you did all that within, I think, 9 years or something, which was, you know, only about 3 people have done that in that short a time. Anyway, I just want to say the format is very simple. I'm just going to have a conversation with Jeremy, and in a minute I'm going to throw open the floor for questions. The only proviso is that the question has got to be intelligent, and Jeremy does not have to answer any question he doesn't like. If he doesn't like the look of you, if he doesn't like the tone of your question, you'll be passed over. I'm sorry about the lights, because after, usually there's a wonderful light coming through, but after this session we've got a play coming up, so we've had to put the blinds down, but also there are too many fans trying to look into Jeremy. We don't want them to do that free. Now, Jeremy, I remember you when I was very young, when I came to watch David Essex in Godspell, and I think you were already there. I think either as Judas or John the Baptist. I can't remember. Both. Oh, right. Well, there it is. And I also remember the occasion when David Essex was playing on stage, and that night his wife gave birth, and in the middle of the second act, you passed him a piece of paper and said, "Congratulations, it's a girl." and it was very emotional and so forth. Do you remember that evening?
I do. It was in the round house. It wasn't a piece of paper. Yeah, I was told.
You told
they told me through the grill. We played inside the sort of wire grill, and one of the stage management said, "Yeah." So in the middle of I don't remember if it was the middle of the song, but I said, "It's a girl," which can only be beaten by my wife, who in the middle of sorry to interrupt you, David, no. But in the middle of a play I was doing called Wild Oats at the Piccadilly Theatre, not far from here. We never met on stage, but we would sometimes pass in the wings, and I had a very fast exit in. She had just come off, and in the back, behind the back side heap, we passed, and she said, "I am with child." And I had to go on. And I remember nothing about the scene except mortgages and school fees.
You didn't pass out. Listen, you have a very distinctive voice. I read that some expert linguist and sound recordist decided that you probably have the best voice in the world. And that perhaps the only more perfect voice would be if it was a combination between yours and Rickman.
The late Alan Rickman.
The late, yes, Alan Rickman, with whom you starred in that marvellous movie, Die Hard.
We know, I played his brother in Mum 2, he played in number 1, and I played in number 3, his supposed brother. Yeah. I said to him, "Alan, I'm going to play just like you, but slightly less camp."
But you have been described, your voice has been described as chocolate on gravel.
I can't hear it, I don't know.
I mean, do people say to you, say something to me? I mean, do people stop you in the street?
No.
And say, "Excite me"?
No, I could repeat, I don't know how many of you listen to Radio 2, but I got into great trouble the other day recounting this story about when John Hurt and I were neighbours in Hampstead, and we were sort of getting to the age where suddenly you could see a younger generation coming up who were rather good, which always makes you a little bit worried. It's sort of late 20s, 30, when you suddenly realise you are not the youngest on the scene and the most wonderful. And we were having a cup of coffee, and I said, "John, you notice an awful lot of rather good actors sort of appearing out of the woodwork who are young." He said, "Yes." He said, "What?" He said, "What I do." He said, if I meet one of them, I say, "You have a wonderful voice. Have you ever listened to it?" And he's fucked. is messed up. So I never think about my voice or listen to it.
But you were criticised for using the four-letter word.
I didn't realize it. Radio 2 you can't. Radio 4 you can. But anyway, Chris Evans, I thought was about to have a fit. He was my interviewer. And
he immediately said, I apologize.
he knelt on the floor in front of the microphone and said, I'm so sorry, and I really apologise, and etc., etc. And I apologised to him because I realised I'd done a terrible thing. And of course, as soon as the programme was over, he said, it's not matter at all, but I just have to sound, you know. I thought Kenneth Tynan had done it sort of 50 years ago, and we got over it.
Well, I mean, the world regresses, I'm afraid.
It's a very difficult story to tell without the last word being.
Well, it's good that you said it. Listen, you have worked with, I mean, do you realise how many films you've made?
No.
I counted today, 86.
Really?
Yes, 86.
I'm very old.
Okay, but I mean, you have worked with everybody. I mean, I of course remember Brideshead when it first came out. We were all glued to the television, and it was the same across the Atlantic. And you worked with obviously Laurence Olivier as Marge Main, and John Gielgud as your father. What were they like? I mean, tell us a couple of anecdotes about.
Well, they were wonderful. I mean, I remember John. I just read, maybe because I knew I was going to work with him, I'd read John Gielgud's autobiography, and I enjoyed it. It was quite funny and quite interesting. And then I went and had dinner with him up somewhere near Castle Howard. We were sitting there, and he was telling those glorious stories about it. And I said, John, none of this is in your book. Why not? And he said, oh, I couldn't possibly write this down. I'd upset too many people. And so that was the one thing that made me decide never to do an autobiography, because you can't write the truth, because you'd upset everybody.
I think you ought to. You can publish it posthumously.
Then one has one's children to worry. No, I think it's just
Ian
not.
Foster published his Maurice, which is all about homosexuality, which was banned at the time, and he made sure that it was published afterwards. So, you know, people can say what they want.
Yeah, there are friends who live longer than you, there are children, other generations. I'm not sure it's a good idea at all.
I think it's a very good idea. But how about Laurence Olivier?
Olivier, I mean, Gielgud, I only really had one sequence with Gielgud, and we were, I remember it was a fish dinner, the two of us. We were saying very little to each other, and we were just eating this fish as only he can, getting the bones out of his teeth and all of this, and sort of ignoring each other. I was, as his son, extremely bored and unhappy. And he was in a terrible state because he did his angle, and then they came back and they wanted to shoot me, but seeing him over his shoulder. And the script girl came with this list, and when he lifts his napkin, you have to take a fishbone out of the object with your right hand. And then when you say so and so, you put down your knife and fork, and you wipe your mouth with the napkin, and then when you say that, he was just, you could see, because I mean, he was then older than I am now. If anybody says that sort of thing to me now, I just say, oh, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry. Just find another way to shoot this, because I'm not going to spend the next 5 minutes when I'm talking and trying to act, thinking about whether I've got my fork in my right hand or my left hand, or the fishbone is in the side of my mouth, or that side of my mouth. We have to find another way to do it. And Paul, I saw him really get sort of upset about it, and that was the only thing he was thinking about. And I realized that actors, never mind how experienced you are, how much older you get, you're always terrified and you always feel you can't do it. He did give me one piece of advice, which was, I said to him, how do you say, I had a sort of semi-laugh line, and I said, Sir John, how do you say this? And he said, I said, oh, that's great. So I went outside into the corridor when they were relighting from my angle, and I sat there and I went, sound right to me. So I couldn't. I came back and did it my way, and felt rather apologetic that I'd let him down.
But did you feel that he was a great presence?
Oh, a huge presence. I mean, it was sad because when I was sort of at that age, I loved getting food from older actors, more experienced actors, sort of ideas but it wasn't fashionable at that time. I mean, we just had Joe Orton and all of that, and people like Gilbert especially, who was a very, very 30s actor, very fine actor, he'd been sort of laughed out of court by this new kitchen sink drama. He was sort of old-fashioned. Yes, he did come back and do things like Brideshead and do that wonderful movie.
Chariots of Fire.
What did he do that?
Yes, he was the master of Cambridge, Trinity.
Right, but he did another one called
Prosperous Books.
What was it?
Prosperous Books.
Prosperous Books, absolutely.
Prosperous, yeah, exactly, yes.
So he sort of came into his own nearer his death. But at this point, when I was working with him, he would never have proffered me advice. And I really regret that, because you know, that generation had their fingers burnt by the actual thing you are doing, you know, to speak like a, you know. And so he kept himself to himself, that's what I'm saying, and I regret that.
Do you know who lives in his house now, the house in which he died?
Sir Lord Tony Baron
Yeah,
Blair.
exactly, it was Tony Blair.
He does.
I read there once and I said, this is very, very tasteful for you, Tony. Because it was Gilbert, he didn't move anything. But how about Laurence Olivier, who was Lord Marchmont?
Well, he wasn't very well. I mean, he had.
Well, he wasn't very well in the story.
No, he wasn't very well in the story, but he wasn't very well in life, and we were very lucky to get him. I remember I had to do a little scene with him where he finally, because for those of you who haven't seen it, the 2 or 3 of you, I hope, who haven't seen it, at the end of his life, he's always denied his Catholicism and there's a Catholic family, and he comes home to die. And we are hoping that he will receive supreme unction, I think it's called, and show a sign of his belief in his faith before he dies. And I am kneeling at the end of his bed, an unbeliever, but a friend of the family. And I watch him cross himself. And that's the shot. That's my reaction to that moment. And it was first up in the morning, I remember, and we were shooting in a room that I used to stay in when I went off to Castle Howard to stay with George Howard before we made Brideshead. And Olivier was staying in the room next door, in Victoria's bedroom. And Charles Sturridge, the director, said to me, can you do the shot without him? Because he's not very well, I want to give him a lie-in, and I don't want to drag him out of bed this Sunday morning. I said, listen, I am reacting to what he does. I have not a clue what he's going to do. How can I possibly react to something I don't know what it is? You've got to get him up. So anyway, rather far from everyone thought I was extremely ungenerous. Anyway, eventually Larry came into the room and his simplistic guy said, I gather you can't do without me, dear boy. I said, you're absolutely right, sir. Absolutely right, can't. And in fact, when he did it, of course, it was deeply moving, and I was able to do it in such a way that I would never have done had I tried to imagine what he was doing.
I mean, Brideshead was really television at its best. I mean, do you agree? I mean,
I don't know. I'm proud of it. Yeah, I'm proud of it. I mean, I think the great thing about Brideshead, because when we started, you know, it was a script by John Mortimer, who did Rumpole, amongst other things. Rumpole was made. And he'd written a script which I think was either 6 or 8 hours long. No, either 6 or 8 episodes. And about a week before we were due to go to Malta to do our first week's filming, which was actually the week before Mrs. Thatcher came in, so that sort of tells you roughly when it was. The Germans, who had a lot of money in it, said, we want to pull out because we think the scripts have lost the Proustian quality which Brideshead, the book, has.
Well, the German complaining about an English story from a French point of view.
Yeah.
So, that's what the Germans do.
We are, after all, in Europe, and we were even there. So our producer, a wonderful man called Derek Granger, who should really take all the praise for Brideshead, actually, he said, don't worry, keep in mind where it is, we'll do the book. And when we went out to Malta to shoot, we didn't have scripts, we just had the book. And we would look up the bit where Sebastian goes to Morocco, which is what we were shooting in Malta, and we did what War said we said, and did what War said we did. And slowly the script department of Granada Television began to catch up and produce scripts for sort of around what we were doing. And it turned into 13 hours of television in 11 episodes. And I think one of the things that made it great was that we gave value and justice to the book, instead of what television feels itself bounden to do, which is to cut. I mean, I can't understand why. Charles Dickens, for example, who wrote weekly and kept the nation on tenterhooks with his stories, is now reduced into sort of 2-hour television films, or 4-hour or 6-hour maybe. Why not just start at the beginning and go through? Why do we have to have things like Holby City and EastEnders? Why can't we have Charles Dickens done with the same sort of pace?
Nickleby was 13 hours. So
was it?
In a theatre. In a theatre.
Oh no, yes, theatre. Was it 13
But I mean, yes. But John
But
Morton,
surely television is ideal. This extended way of telling a story, which is what we were allowed to do in Brideshead, and was a huge privilege. And now you never could. Television has changed completely. The guy who ran Granada, what was his name?
Michael Green.
No, Michael Green. It wasn't Michael Green. He was out again.
It was fact that Lord Grey put a fancy gun. Lord Grey. Michael Grey. Michael Grey with a fancy
Yeah,
gun.
but actually it wasn't, it was the Plowright. That's right. It was, it was Plowright. It was
They're all the same.
Anyway, he would ring up our producer and say, "Where are you now?" And Derek would say, "Oh, we're in Cumberland shooting this scene." He said, "Oh, great, how's it going?" "It's going fine." "Well, now you can't do that. Now, if you want to change a word, then telephone calls have to be made to committees. Committees have to convene to see whether something can be changed. Everything has to be done in 2 minutes flat, otherwise it can't be paid for." Television has really changed, which is why some of it is absolutely wonderful and some of it is not.
All right, well,
Take your pick.
let's go back to films, which is, of course, your central occupation. I mean, I can think of 3 absolute favourite movies of mine: French Lieutenant's Woman, The Mission, and Reversal of Fortune, for which you won an Oscar. So tell us about Klaus von Bürne, who is a great friend of mine, and when I see him now, I always go like this: "Morning, Klaus." And he doesn't like that very much.
How is he?
He survives. But I gather you met him eventually at a cricket match.
I did. I hadn't wanted to meet him because it's very difficult if you're playing a character to meet someone else who says they're who you are.
Especially when you're a murderer.
Yeah, well, possible, yes. And so I hadn't met him in my research. I'd met a lot of people who knew him and I talked to them about him. People like, what's his name, who wrote the Callas biography, John, people who knew him well. And I got a pretty good take on him. I watched him on television. There was a lot of news broadcasts. This is a guy, for those who don't know, who was accused of trying to poison his rich American wife by injecting her with insulin.
Gradually.
Gradually, yeah. And he went to court and he got off. And it was that story. Glenn Close played my wife, comatose most of the time, but nevertheless dazzling. And I hadn't wanted to meet Klaus because I thought because he was very unlike me. He used to write me postcards, because the trouble is when you've done a film, you have to publicise it, and you're talking about the story from the point of view of your character. So for me, I was talking as if I was Klaus, and I would talk about my class, and I would say things, and he would write me these little closely written postcards. I think I've got them still somewhere, saying I'm not like that, I don't do that, I don't believe that, I wouldn't say that, and etc. etc. And I just sort of put them in a drawer. And when I went to a very, very wealthy neighbour of mine in Oxfordshire, John Bulgetti, who's now died, sadly, we lived in a wonderful estate. We had a great cricket pitch, and he'd have cricket matches, and we'd go and watch and have cream teas, and it was all lovely. And my eldest son, who was at the time about 13, wanted to go down and get football players autograph, who happened to be playing in the cricket team that afternoon. So we went down to tea, and I took him so he could get the autograph. And Getty said to me, Klaus von Bülow's in the library. Now, Getty has one of the greatest libraries in the world. He's looking around the library. I know you've never wanted to meet him. I quite understand if you go. I said, no, the movie was sort of 3 or 4 years ago. I really don't know. I'd love to meet him. So I didn't go. And we got the autograph, and I was standing in the pavilion just above the steps watching the cricket. And there was a back entrance to the pavilion, up back steps. And I heard this voice behind me say, "You see, I'm not fat." And I looked round, and it was Klaus. And I said, "I never said you were fat. I said you were bigger than me." Which he is. He's a bigger man. Sort of fair. And I'm quite Slim Jim, or was this. And so he said, "Oh, he forgave me that, obviously." He said, "I understand. Do you see anything of Alan Dershowitz?" Now, Alan Dershowitz was the lawyer, played by Ron Silver in the film, who got Klaus off. He said, "Do you see anything of Alan Dershowitz, who was around when we were making the film?" I said, "No, I haven't seen him really since we released the film, 2 or 3 years ago." He said, "Oh." He said, "I understand he's representing Leona Helmsley and Mike Tyson at the moment." I said, "Yes, I read that." He said, "You haven't been asked to play either of them." I said, "I thought Mike Tyson, who's I'm sure you all know that was slightly beyond my range, but I had a track at the area." We passed.
Well, we loved using Mrs. Helmsley. But how about the mission? I mean, you are a Catholic.
No, I'm not.
I thought you announced that you don't go to church, but you're more or less Catholic. Your family is Catholic.
I'm not a club man.
Well, you're not a club man, but you believe more or less in the Catholic faith, and your children and your wife are all Catholic. Is that right?
My wife is Catholic. My children were brought up as Catholics. I was baptized Church of England. I go to Catholic mass.
Right, exactly. So you're Catholic. So did you? You're more Catholic. No, for God's sake, right? It's all right. I'm Catholic. You don't have to be apologetic about it.
No, I'm very proud of it.
But did you feel something tremendous in the mission? I mean, it's like Brideshead. I mean, you have to be Catholic in a way to understand that book. And I thought that in the mission, it was that sort of feeling.
Well, it was meant that, I don't know if you've seen the mission, it's such a long time ago, but if you haven't, get it up, because it actually stands up quite well. It's about the Jesuits who went to South America to start the first commune, first communist society in the world, in Ecuador and Uruguay and whatever. And there's a wonderful book, if you're interested in that subject, called Red Gold, which was my research book, and it's a tremendous read about these extraordinary people. I'm in the same sort of time as Cervantes, Don Quixote chasing the windmills, and here are these extraordinary, active priests going into the unknown. And I mean, and using. Oh, I have to sit near her, do I? Okay.
Yeah,
all right, keep it
you
back.
were in the cheap corner.
If you can't hear, wave. These extraordinary. I remember there's one little piece in the book where it talks about them going. They were all musicians because you didn't have telly. And so once you'd read your books, it was quite nice to just play. And so they would all play, and there's a moment where they're floating up some river, I don't know what it was, rather slowly on this large raft with this little hut in the middle with sort of leaves on the top, keep the sun off. And the banks became full with Indian tribe, with their blowguns. And they thought, we're in big trouble here, because the river was getting narrower. And they were looking very menacing. And so they got their instruments out, and they started playing. And the Indians slowly lowered their blowguns and sat on their haunches and listened. And really from that, it's magical when it happens, but from that moment they learned that there was something in the power of music which could help them communicate with these unknown tribes. And in fact, the Guarani, the tribe who our story was based on, big tribe, in sort of where Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina meet. They were some of the greatest instrument makers in South America, I think, violins, whatever. So, I read this book about these people, and I thought this is a fantastic story. And I was, Robert De Niro was playing a sort of renegade guy, slave trader, who repents. And I was the priest who sort of helped him repent, or tried to help him repent. It was an extraordinary, Bob didn't want me to do it. He wanted Christopher Logue, who was an English poet, now dead.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Christopher Logue, or he wanted, who directed On the Waterfront? Kazan, Ilya Kazan, thanks.
Yeah.
He wanted Ilya Kazan to do it. Ilya said, no, I'm a director, I'm not an actor. Bob, there had been a wonderful film called, what was the one Roland Joffé made out in Vietnam? Killing Fields. Called The Killing Fields, with Sam Waterston and a man, not an actor, called Dispraw, who played the other character. And Bob loved that relationship between a professional actor and a person. And that's what he wanted. He wanted a person to play me, hence a poet or a film director. David Putnam, who was the producer, was worried that, strange enough, the part was written for my father-in-law, Sir Cusack, great Irish actor, now dead, but it was written 10 years before we went into production. By the time we went into production, he was too old. And David Putnam said, we must have an actor who can deal with the rigour that we're going to have to face, the rigours. And I had done a sort of afternoon workshop with Bob, which hadn't gone well because he didn't want me to do it. And I was doing a play on Broadway at the time, and I came back to England, and I heard really nothing, and I called David Putnam, and I said, have you cast that part yet? He said, no, I haven't, why? I said, well, because, I quite like to do it. He said, would you? I said, yes, I would. He said, does Roland know that, Roland Joffé, the director? I said, no, I don't know. We thought I might. He said, well, you better ring and tell him. Well, I said, where is he? He said, he's in Cartagena, building the settles. So I gave him a call from the same room where John Hurt and I had that story about voices, actually. And I said, Roland, listen, you haven't cast that part yet. Do you get rose thorns in your figures?
Not really.
No. You haven't cast that part yet. I quite like to do it. He said, would you? I said, yes, I would. He said, well, come on up. So I did. I went on up, and Bob didn't talk to me, I think, for the first 2 months of shooting. Sort of actually ignored me until we had a huge fight in the middle of the jungle in a make-up bus. And we called each other exactly what we thought of each other to some, unfortunately, fairly soundproof bus. But word got out that we'd have a bit of a set to, and my missus was staying on the coast, and as was Bob's lady, Tookie. And the word got back, and Sinead said, we must have a really great dinner tonight. So Tookie cooked up some amazing spaghetti bolognese and rolled a couple of wonderful joints. And we had the best evening ever. And Bob is now one of my best friends.
I really urge anybody who has not seen The Mission to do so. And of course, you mentioned about the music, and Morricone was a genius, I thought. I mean, as a modern composer, I don't think anybody can touch him on what he did on The Mission, on the music of that.
It was good, although I have to say that when Charlie Sturridge first played me Geoffrey Berger's music for Brideshead, which was the morning that we were going to start doing voiceover, I said, Charlie, most of my performance is in that music. It's fantastic.
It is.
It's so important if the music's right.
Yes. And one more thing before I open the floor. French Lieutenant's Woman. I mean, you were working with Meryl Streep, one of the great actors of the world. What was it like? And did you think that it was another extraordinary movie?
It's my first starring movie. I didn't feel like a film star. I looked at Meryl and I saw this consummate actress. And even now, when I look at the film, I think I'm pretty horrible. But Meryl taught me a lot of very important things for a young actor. She taught me that my importance had nothing to do with the length of the vehicle I was travelling in. And that the only thing that mattered, because when you work in the movie industry, there's a huge amount of on every just towards the work. That is the only thing that matters. And everything you do...
The book.
What?
The book, you mean?
No, the work. The work we are doing. The translation of a book into the scene. The scene we're doing. That is the only important thing. Nothing else. You know, how big your dressing room is, where your caravan is parked, what you're being paid, what your makeup's like. None of that matters. Just get that scene as good as you can. And the purity of that was wonderful for me. It sort of laid, and I hope continues to lay, at the bottom of my career, what there is of it.
It was an extraordinary book as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Harold Pinter, of course, had done an amazing translation as far as turning a book, John Fowles's book, into a screenplay.
I'm amazed that Daniel Martin was not made. It was the other book that John Fowles.
Is it? I haven't read it.
Yes. And what was the other one he wrote, which was made? It was the one where he captured the girl.
Oh, which he hated.
Collector.
What?
No, not the collector.
Not the yes, the collector.
No, it wasn't the collector.
I think it was the collector. There were two parts. Told by the man. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Look, listen. I don't want to hog the floor. And the only other thing I want to say to you is that did you realise that you actually played in a film that I financed?
What, the Hong Kong film?
No, not the Hong Kong film, not the one that you did. In fact, you did a film with Gong Li called The Chinese Box, which I premiered in New York when I opened Shanghai Tang. No, it's not that, but that is the one film that you did not make any money. What is it called? Dungeons and Dragons.
You're an absolute fool.
Oh, you a fool. I mean, you acted it. And that's what I said to Jerry Mines. I said, woof. I pushed it. I mortgaged my house and put
There was another. Who was the guy who made the clothes? Because he had not made the clothes.
And Zeman.
That's right.
Yeah.
He put a lot of money into it.
Yeah, I know.
It was a hopeless idea.
After me. Because you went over budget.
But it was a young director who'd never made a film before. I cannot tell you. I flew out to we were making it in Prague. I flew out to this film studio where a tower had been built in the film studio. A tower, 4-story tower, and where we were, and it's surrounded by green screen, which meant that they could sort of place it wherever they were going to place it, in the middle of the jungly moon or somewhere, I don't know where it was going to go. It was all lovely, and we climbed up. There was a scene with I think 5 of us or 6 of us, and we were being attacked by dragons. That was the scene. They were going to put all that on the green screen afterwards. And we got 5 or 6 of us up there, and they said, "Okay, stop." And I said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, 2 things. First of all, half of you are disappearing because you're wearing this sort of silvery fabric, which is reflecting the green off the screen. So that bits of you are disappearing. And secondly, this tower is only strong enough to take 8 people, and the camera crew consisted of 15. So totally went over budget. That was the first day. I could have told you, you should have rung me.
I thought I was rather grand, trying to keep quiet. Now look, listen, I could of course go and ask you lots of questions, but let's have an intelligent question from a fan. Come on. All right, okay. Man with a bald head. Then everybody can hear.
Jeremy, I was just curious to know, as an actor, which is the character you most identify with, and why?
I don't think I mean, I've been them. I don't identify with them. I sort of, I am them. Sometimes less successfully than others, one has to be said. But at the time, you are them, good or bad. That's your job, really, to be them. So I couldn't tell you. I suppose the ones that I've done best, perhaps you would think, are the ones that I've identified with best. But that's not for me to say.
People who've seen you in Brideshead, when they open the first chapter, they can hear you. I mean, that's Charles Ryder, speaking.
Right.
I mean, but of course you immersed yourself in every character, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I did identify with, how many people haven't seen Brideshead?
Oh,
Okay,
such a big.
well, go home and have your weekend set up. They say that
Have you read the book, for example? Oh, for God's sake.
to go through
Next
a bottle
time
of
I'm going to
champagne.
have a screen test. I'm going to have a literature test before you come and listen to the Chinese.
I was about to say, to go to bed with a bottle of champagne and someone you love for the weekend is the best way to see Brexit, but maybe not when the weather's this good. But when I read that, there was about these two men, Charles and Sebastian, about many other things, but they asked me to play Sebastian, and I felt very strongly I wanted to play Charles. I thought, this is the man I was educated to be, and the man I'm about to say goodbye to in my life, I hope. So I did identify closely with him.
Artistic, slightly bohemian, observer of some extraordinary lives.
Yes, a man outside,
Yes,
a sort of a man outside who watched and lived by
How about Lolita? Did you fancy yourself as being?
Lolita?
Yeah.
I think the less we say about that, the better.
In this time and age, yes, you take on. Right, listen.
I wanted to ask you about Damage, the film that you did, I think it was 92, kind of political one, because I thought that was a very interesting performance. It was a kind of film that possibly people didn't expect you to be in. If you could talk a little bit about the experience of making that film, please.
Extraordinary book.
A great book, I think better book than a film, actually. Directed by
Josephine Hart, who unfortunately died last year.
Josephine's best book, I think. If those, especially you blokes, if you haven't read Damage, if you haven't
Have you read? Anybody seen Damage? Know the story? Absolutely
It's a
exhausting.
helter-skelter ride.
And then you feel exhausted after you watch it.
You what?
Exhausted.
After you watch the film?
Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't watched it for years. But the book certainly will give you an extraordinary read. What was the question?
Why did you play the father?
Well, I was too old to play the son. And no one asked me to play the Holy Ghost. No, but
Juliette Binoche, you played against.
I did. Played with is not what we normally say. Louis Malle, great French director, gave me the book in Los Angeles and said, will you read it? And I read it, and I said, so he said, I want to make a film of it, will you do it? I said, yes.
That was that.
No, then he tried to cast the woman, and we were going to use Isabelle Arjani. It's a fantastic idea. Isabelle suddenly read in the newspaper that Juliette Binoche was going to do it, so that's the way of the industry. And Juliette, who is, I think, an amazing actress, wonderful, but she was going through a period in her life, she just broken up with a very abusive relationship, and she didn't like men very much. So that's what I was sort of faced with, and the script, which I took exception to some things in and we had to change, written by David Hare, not a man renowned for sexual passion in his writing, nevertheless a story which concerned that, so we worked a bit on that, and I remember he wrote, and there were 8 occasions where this was about a couple, a man who meets his nemesis, who meets the only woman in the world who is meant to meet him. And he's a married man, and we later discover that she is engaged to his son. They have to meet very privately in a Muse house, which she has, I think, rented. Yes, she's rented. And it's extraordinary that their relationship really only takes place in their bedroom, or certainly in the Muse. And he is a typical English man who is a little bit retarded sexually, and she teaches him throughout the story that in love and in sex and in the erotic world, anything is possible. And she pulls him down to the blackness throughout the relationship. And the relationship, as I say, only exists when they are inside this music house. Very illicit relationship. And David Hare had written 8 times in the script on the 8 occasions where they met in this music house, they make love. I said, David, this is like Alan Lerner, who's a songwriter, saying, they sing. What do they sing? And he sort of became very retiring, so I couldn't possibly say that. You and Louis and Juliet were working that out. And so we had to. And it's a film that some people love. I think it's less than what it could have been.
All right. Another question. Yeah. 3 questions with 3 people with beards. Let's have a woman next time.
Thank you very much. How much does a physical location affect your acting? For example, you talked obviously the mission that Brideshead Revisited, very authentic, versus a green screen that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I hate green screen. I hate green screen. I hate movies that have green screen. You can always tell, you know, it's getting better, but you can still tell. And I hate doing it because it's boring, and I hate watching it because it's patronizing. I love the real location, and I'm lucky enough that normally I'm working at the occasion. I mean, in Batman it's true, no, I mean, the Batcave was dead real, blew me away. Outside the lake, real. And Justice League, which we're doing now, most of that is real, and it really helps. You can't tell why, you certainly can't tell the money men why, but just it does.
Are you ashamed of being the butler?
Am I ashamed? I'm extraordinarily proud.
Because you were well paid.
No.
But I thought you said, you gave an interview, slightly, not saying that you were ashamed, but you were not proud of it, but you said that, you know, it pays the school fee, not school fees, but I mean, I mean, you got 7 houses, so you obviously got 6 houses. Sorry, 6 houses. When did you start the last one?
No, I mean, listen, I'm very proud of it. As an actor, you have 2 boxes. You have your artistic box, which has your crown jewels in it. Your jewels are things you can do, the things you take care of, the things you polish, the things you pull out when you have to. And you have your business box. And your business box you have to take care of. You have to make sure that you are in a position to pull audience members into a theatre, into a cinema, so that you'll be paid by producers in order to do that. You have to make sure that your career has a wide enough legs, so that if you do a stage appearance in New York and it bombs, then you can still play London, or you can still play Europe. You can do films. You can do you have a wide, because actors' careers go in waves. You've got ups and downs, and if you have a career that is set on a wide rock, then with any luck you'll have longevity. So that box thinks about those things. Well, when you do a film like Justice League or Batman versus Superman, what you're doing is you're saying to, I mean, 3 films I made last year, High Rise, Man Who Knew Infinity, and Race, which is about to come out. Very hard to finance those sort of movies, and you will be brought into them, offered the role, if you can hopefully bring a bit of an audience who will say, oh, I saw him in Batman against Superman, he's quite interesting, I'll go and see him in that film, which I've never heard of. So that's the sort of play-off you do, and as an actor, if you're trying to run a career, you have to make sure you do pictures that millions of people see. I mean, Batman has taken over $900 million, I think, dollars, which is quite a big amount. It's only been out 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something.
And you're contracted to do a second one?
I chose that if the first one worked, I'd do a second, yeah.
The business spot swells. Now,
Not
let's talk
necessarily.
about your film coming out, The Man with Infinity, about this Indian mathematician. Brilliant.
It's come out, it's gone.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's been out,
Well,
gone.
yeah.
That's England for you, that's the distribution
Really?
system, yep. Comes and goes. We don't nurture in this country our films. You have to be very quick off the mark to see a lot of great movies I mean, I see them, and I assume everyone else has seen them, because I get them sent from the European Academy and from the American Academy in order to judge them. So I get to see these films. And then I watch how when they come out here, and it's here and gone, and I get so angry, actually, for our cinema audience, because
I was looking forward to it. I mean, it's
Oh,
not
sorry, you got to go
you
fast.
play the great British mathematician, Hardy, and it is an extraordinary story. And is it a good film?
I think it's very good. Yeah, and I don't think many films I do are very good, but I think it's really delightful. It's about Ramanujan, Indian mathematician, comes over, is brought over by G.H. Hardy, a Cambridge mathematician, in 1913, because Ramanujan, who's almost, I mean, he's not got any university education, but he dreams the most extraordinary mathematical theories and equations, dreams them. I mean, when asked to describe where he gets them from, he says, my goddess, Namajura, I think the name is, or Nama something, puts them on my tongue when I'm asleep, and in the morning I know them, and I write them down. And those equations, those extraordinary calculations, are still being proven now, which is what mathematicians have to do with this sort of thing, and are being used for the study of black holes, for the study of string theory, although Ramanujan died, I think, at the age of 27 in about 1930. So an extraordinary, instinctive mathematician that makes you wonder where it comes from. I mean, I remember Tom Stoppard saying to me once when we were talking about God, he said, I find it, about Darwin, he said, I find it very hard to believe that Shakespeare is descended from a green blob. And I know what he means, but somehow, sometimes people are thrown up, and Ramanujan, where does he come from? You know, illiterate, in the middle of India. And he's one of the 5 great mathematicians that people are still trying to understand.
It is an extraordinary story. But
Yeah.
how about Race, which is the other
That's
film,
not
which
the story. The story is about his relationship between Hardy and him, which is very touching.
But the other film you mentioned just now, Race, is coming out, right?
Yeah, Race is coming.
That's about the 1936 Olympics, is that right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
you were the man, what was his name, Burbridge or whatever, who was the
Burbridge?
no Avery.
Brundage.
Brundage, sorry.
You can't read your writing, that's what it is.
No, I don't have it here. That's why I can't remember. And I haven't got it. I knew it was something like
Avery Brundage.
He's an American, so it doesn't really matter. But he led the US team. There was Jesse Owen, one day
Yeah.
in Berlin.
He was the Seth Blatter of the Olympic Committee, and had a reputation about as dodgy as Seth Blatter. But in fact, I was fascinated because he was a lover of sport, and he kept the Americans in that Olympics. They didn't want to go because of what they heard was happening in Nazi Germany in 1936. And he said, sport is above politics. Sport, we have to keep going. If everybody says, I don't want to go to wherever, Beijing, South Africa, Moscow, because I don't agree with their politics, then we'll never have international sport. Sport must be separate from that. And if the Olympics are a great international success, then that must help world cohesion. And I agree completely with it, so I was very happy there.
Well, I mean, the other extraordinary story, talking about the Olympics, is the one before, in 1932, when one competitor from China entered. And it's an extraordinary story of how he just made it to carry the flag, sailing across the Pacific. But that's another story.
What was his sport?
He was 100 meters running, and he sailed from Shanghai to Los Angeles, and there was a storm, and the boat had to be put in Hawaii. They lay for 4 days, and the captain told him, he says, I'm afraid you're going to be on time for your race, but you won't be able to represent China. But at that time, the only reason why he went was because there was the Japanese invasion, and they wanted to show the world that China was still standing. And he says, I'm afraid you can't. But he then discovered the boat was actually going to San Francisco first, and he persuaded all the passengers who were going to San Francisco to let the boat steam straight to Los Angeles in order for him to be there on time. Anyway, the story read that the boat went straight to San Francisco, straight to Los Angeles, and he just made the parade.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. All right, another question. Yes, okay, let's have a lady.
There's a lady.
There's a lady over there and then a lady over here.
It's swarming with ladies.
Hi. A lot of young male actors starting out now talk about feeling objectified in the same way that women are. Sorry, over here.
Oh yeah.
And I was wondering if you think the two are the same and if you ever felt that way when you were starting out.
No, but things have changed enormously. Did everyone hear that question?
No. You can stand up and ask it.
Well, I can tell you that a lot of young male actors are now feeling objectified in the same way that women used to, or maybe still are feeling objectified in the industry. And was it like that when I started? It wasn't, is the answer. My son has just started, and I sort of see, I mean, there are a lot of pretty boys out there in the business at the moment, aged between sort of 20 and 30. Some of them are very talented, but they are all mostly very, very easy on the eye, in a way that wasn't so important when I was starting out. I remember I used to look at the RADA girls and I used to think it's really hard luck for them because they're going to be cast because they're lovely and blonde and wonderful, and after 2 years people will find out they can't do it and their career will be over. And I think the same danger exists for men now. The business is really so different. I think it's very hard to get a broad-based career going now. Celebrity is sort of such a big thing now. And everybody's after it. Everybody wants to be famous and win, come dancing and win X.
Oh, come dancing.
You know, as if that's it. The arts is not about celebrity. It's been turned into that by the media. It's not about that. Celebrity, in this which, or celebrityhood, I don't know what the word is, somebody will tell me, or just celebrity, has no value. As once again, calling up the great Tom Stoppard, he said, all it means is that more people know you than you know. That's it. That's all it means. That is the only value it has. And it's sometimes useful personally to get a seat in a restaurant, but nothing else.
You always get a seat, you ring up and say, Jeremy Irons for 6 at 8 o'clock. Do they say you can only come at 7 or 9? So give me your credit card, because if you don't turn up, we're going to charge you. I mean, do you have that sort of problem?
I don't, but I don't need that much. Mrs.
Well,
Mrs. Ryan's got 6
6
houses
houses.
at home.
Yes, go on.
Okay. I have a more political question, I'm afraid. I'm from Germany, and we are following now currently the upcoming referendum on Brexit. And my question is, if this Brexit really happens, in which way will this affect your work or the conditions of the British film industry?
I think one of the things about this debate is that nobody really knows.
No.
And they all keep saying how it's going to be. Cameron will say and Farage will say. Nobody really knows. I suspect it won't be that different, whatever we do. But I think the big thing is that we should say, as a country, what we believe in. And what I would like my country to believe in is the unity of Europe. We're all very different. Some of us are extremely poor, some of us are extremely lazy, some of us are extremely rich. It's like any family. But I think we're probably better together. And we have a sort of anarchic, or we do if we'll let it free, a sort of anarchic naturalness as a country, which I think Europe really respects and needs in the steering of its direction. There's a huge amount wrong with the EU, and I beefed against it ever since we joined. I said I'm not a European. Now push comes to shove, I've decided that I am a European. I want to be somebody who stays and makes it get better, rather than someone who goes backward and gets out. I think there's a huge amount wrong with it. but let's be in there and help get it right. I mean, everything's always a compromise. But I think there are many problems which everyone is thinking Europe can solve. Staying in or keeping up or getting out will solve the problem. It won't. I think things will stay the same. We'll still have this iniquitous gap between the very wealthy and the very poor. And that's what we should concentrate on. And I think we will still have a capitalist system which is past its sell-by date. And I think we have to look at it very carefully and say, you, sir, capitalism are like water. We need you to survive, but you can drown us. And we will not let you do that. And I think what is happening in a small way, drip by drip in our society, is that unregulated capitalism is drowning many people in society, and many people are getting obscenely wealthy. And that is what we have to address. And whether we're in or out of Europe, I don't think will make any difference.
You think the obscenely rich?
But I think we should vote to stay in, and I hope you all will think seriously about it.
Let's have a show of hands. Who is Brexit?
No, we don't have to do that. Whether it's 3 people, 4 people.
I'm a big Brexit fan. Anyway, go on.
Question of Brexit.
Oh yes, absolutely.
God.
There's no rule of law. There's no rule of law in the EU. Go on. Go on. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, quick.
Wondering if there's any one book, play, or particular character that you would really desperately love to play that you haven't yet played, and any actor you may like to work with. Around to in your past career.
A play. Well, I always dreamed of making a play, making a film rather, of a play, Richard II, which I played when I was 32. It was about the right age, and it's not a very dramatic play, Richard II, but it's a wonderful sort of what's the word? Musical. I can't remember the name because of S. It'll come. Started getting old. But it just gently moves. But what is behind it is a huge love of our country. Richard has an amazing love, as does John of Gaunt, with England. When he comes back from Ireland, he falls on the beach and he kisses the sand. He has a huge love. He's hopeless at governing it, but he loves it. And I would love to make a film which shows his slow decline. A man not fit to do a certain job, just not got the right makeup that he's born to. A very, very elegiac film. But I know. But that's one thing. There's a book which I've always wanted to make called A Child in Time by, I'm really testing myself tonight. By what? Ian McEwan. Thank you very much. By Ian McEwan. Wonderful book. And I wanted to direct that for many years. And
Have you directed?
I've directed a rock video with Carly Simon and an hour's television.
A long time ago.
Probably a long time ago, yeah. The trouble is you get spoiled as an actor, you know. I mean, I can make 4 films a year, and if they don't work, I can sort of ease away from them. As a director, you spend 2 years setting it up, you spend a year shooting it, and then 2 years selling it. And if it's a disaster,
I think we have worked with almost every actor I can think of. That's the second part of the question.
Who would I like to work with?
Yes, that you have not done so.
Well, Danny DeVito and I, we're waiting to do something together. He's a great man.
Well, you can do Don Quixote.
We could do Don
Quixote.
In truth, any good actor, because acting's a bit like tennis. If you've got a good person playing the other side of the net.
Okay, that's the last question.
Makes your game.
All right, 2 more. Right, you and then you.
Hi. So first off, love the Richard II idea. Love that play. Secondly, oh by the way, your niece is over here.
Let's get on.
By the way, so I've heard you trained at drama school, and I'm wondering, what did you do to get the most out of that experience? Because we're currently all in drama school, and we'd love to know what worked for you, what didn't, you know, stuff like that.
What did I get most out of drama school?
Yeah.
I don't know. When I left drama school, most people thought I was going to be an antique dealer. But I learned to produce my voice properly. I learned to stand up straight. I learned to sword fight.
This was in Bristol.
It was the Bristol of it, yeah.
You're a busker as well.
I wish you'd let me talk. I learned to appreciate the different styles of writing and different styles of acting. I was able to make a fool of myself in private just amongst my friends and experiment. Fantastic 2 years, but as I say, I showed no aptitude at all, really.
All right. Yes, you. Quick, we're
There's a
gonna.
lady there in orange.
Yeah, that, right. This one and then the orange one, and then the last one at the back.
Flippant question. Gardening or flower arranging or both?
Gardening. Yeah. But I do sometimes do the orange flower. My wife always redoes.
You had thorns now, so you must be gardening or flowering.
If there were to be a film made of your life, who would you like to play you? Any actor living or dead?
I always see this as a column in the paper that does this, isn't there? I mean, I think we should say the name that really sort of most people say when anything is ever asked about who's going to play this or who would be good, which is Benedict Cumberbatch.
Final question.
Hi, I was just thinking about what you said, Meryl Streep said to you about how to do the best job. And when I think about what makes a good performance, it seems you sort of need to understand the character and then empathize with them and then be able to somehow communicate that when you're playing the character. And in terms of how you do that, I always imagined that it would be easier to do it on stage because you play out the story, scene by scene, whereas in a film I feel like there must be a lot of jumping around. So I just wonder, which do you prefer and why, and sort of, do you find one more difficult than the other?
No, I love both film and theatre. The process of finding the character sequentially is slightly different, but you come to the same thing. I mean, you come to being that person, so that it feels entirely natural. And I've just done a play, Longest Journey Tonight at Bristol, which had a huge amount of words, all of which had to be said on the same night in the right order, which of course you don't have to do in film. As you get older, words are harder to learn and keep in your head. So that was quite difficult. And when we finished a relatively short run of 5 weeks, which I loved, I was absolutely exhausted. As was my leading lady, Leslie Manville, who I think is a little bit younger than me, so maybe it's not just age. But there's something nice about the theatre in that you can play the whole phrase that night, whereas film, you are providing the little squares, beautifully stitched, one hopes, which will make up this great counterpane, this great mosaic. But other people will choose what goes next to what. I mean, there are other, I sometimes think it's odd when actors are praised for their film work because so many people go into creating that performance. Whereas in theatre, you stand alone, and if it doesn't work, then it's down to you. So, because I like risk, I like the possibility of failure, I suppose I'm perhaps at the moment more drawn to theatre, where you can fall on your face.
Well, I'm afraid that that's the hour, and Jeremy, I'm very sorry. I got so excited, I kept interrupting you.
No, but I think next week I'd like to come and interview you.
I think flowers are good. Great polymath, Jeremy Irons, will you please join me in thanking him for coming today? Thank you.